You are watching the Midtable Up Podcast highlights. Please put your foot through the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to follow us on our social media and on Spotify and the podcasts app.
I don't think will be, too controversial. I mean, it's very retrospective of sort of they were fantastic at one point and it just went downhill. And it's almost one of those funny stories in football where it almost happened overnight. And it's Joe Hart. I think he had, I know. I mean,
wow.
You're talking about a Premier League winner here. You're talking about someone. Yeah.
That makes me feel a little bit better about Mesut Ozil now. I'm not going to lie.
So from a young age, relatively speaking about goalkeepers, right? From a relatively young age, was thrust into a Man City side that did outstandingly well. Thrust into an England side that I think we all can accept had problems during this period.
Yeah, but I think that's the understatement of the century. Mate.
Yeah. But it's almost like someone flipped a light switch and it just went downhill. And if I had to define it to a moment, it's when the ball went through his legs. I can't remember who we were playing. It was so long ago for England. And it just seems to have gone downhill. He's had spells all over the shop. He came for West Ham for a while.
He was absolutely dreadful at West Ham, honestly. I could not.
I reckon the point it started going downhill for him was when he did the Head and Shoulders commercial. That was the thing that really got into him.
That was the exact moment.
You can pinpoint it pre-Head and Shoulders and afterwards. That's when it really started going wrong.
He needed that dandruff for luck. Yeah. And when the dandruff was gone, he lost
his
it.
Power, goalkeeping power in his dandruff.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting shout, Matt, because Joe Hart, I remember I think it was his City debut, quite clearly. Yep. They were playing Spurs, I think, and at that point, Shay Given was still on the bench, and Spurs really should have battered City that game. Yeah. It was around 2010, I want to say.
It was 2010. I remember it so clearly as well. It was 0-0.
Yeah, me too.
And he was
and I just remember he was absolutely incredible in that game. He was a wall. He was a wall in that goal. And I remember watching him and thinking, God, he must have been around 21 around that time. Yeah. And I remember watching it and thinking, this is the next England goalkeeper for 10 years minimum. Honestly.
If you look at his career then, he'd gone to Birmingham on loan the year before and was fantastic that season as well.
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant.
And I thought he should have started in the World Cup that summer because on form he was the best English goalkeeper that year. And then obviously
he was really good for Birmingham.
And then obviously that whole thing happened, and obviously then was thrust into after Rob Green's mistake. I think David James retired. Then suddenly everyone's going, Joe Hart is the next England goalkeeper.
Exactly.
But I think England has a big problem with goalkeepers of building them up to bring them down. You look at Jordan Pickford now; he's going through the exact same thing today that Joe Hart was going through kind of 4 or 5 years ago.
But I do kind of get where you're coming from, but I would also say that Jordan Pickford has not hit the heights that Joe Hart did.
But there is an issue whereby we seem to want the next young goalkeeper to replace a current goalkeeper, and then once they once they're in, wanting them to fail and starting to pick the next one. You'd think Dean Henderson, people are saying, should be in now. I think there is a problem with that.
I do think that's a very toxic trait, to be fair.
Yeah. And it's something England struggled with for a while. Just one thing, it's almost like most goalkeepers tend to have have their peak later in their career because so much more of it is
about Joe Hart.
That's a very good point.
Joe Hart is 32, 33? That's a goalkeeper. That is absolutely no age.
He should still be in his peak.
That's no age for a goalkeeper, and now he's third choice at Tottenham. That is not where his career should have been. It's almost like
he's gone backward.
And even then, let's be real, he's only at Spurs because they need those homegrown players. Yeah. That's the only reason he's there as a third choice. He's not even there on merit, let's be honest.
No, he's just moving around. And I think the problem for him is he's almost had a bit of... It almost feels like he's got a Benjamin Button career. Like, he had his peak when he was a kid. But on a serious...
I do get where you're coming from.
Yeah. And with what Simon was saying around, he was unstoppable, and you too, George. So much, I think, of being a goalkeeper in every position of football is about confidence. And because we've pulled him down from England, from the clubs that he's been at, like he was terrible for us, in that 17-18 season. He was atrocious.
Absolutely terrible.
But it's not good. It's not constructive. It's even worse when you're a goalkeeper.
No, completely agree. And I remember, to be fair, I was up until he played for us. Funnily enough, I was a big defender of Joe Hart. Especially because obviously he had that nightmare against Iceland at the Euros, and that was effectively what killed not only his England career but also his City career, because Pep Guardiola came in that summer and said, don't want him, not interested. And then he brought in Claudio Bravo, who was an absolute shit show. Shit show at Man City. He could not catch a cold. There was a point where I think he faced about 8 shots in a row that all went in, Claudio Bravo. And I was sitting there going, well, you know what, Pep? And this was obviously before he won the league, and I still had a few doubts about him. And I was sitting there saying, well, you know what, Pep? It's all well and good having a goalkeeper that can play out the back, but if he can't even catch the ball, it's useless to you, or it was worse than useless. And when we got him on loan, at that point, I thought he was an upgrade on Adrian, and I was super excited. I thought, he had that spell at Torino, obviously, that season before he came to us, but I thought, no, we've got a Premier League winning goalkeeper here, who's really should be at this point at the best years of his career coming into. And then it was just a complete disaster. He was so poor for so many of the goals we conceded. And then obviously, rightly so, he got dropped for Adrian again. And then when he didn't go to the World Cup that year, he kind of had the gall to blame David Moyes for not picking him when he was absolutely dreadful. And he's never really recovered since then. Obviously, he had a little stint at Burnley last season, and I know what you mean, because, obviously he has achieved great things in the game. He's won Premier League titles, he's won FA Cups, he's won League Cups. He's probably Manchester City's, obviously Ederson's still there at the minute, so that might change by the time Ederson is finished at City, but he's probably City's greatest ever goalkeeper at this point. And just to completely have a downward spiral like he has, I do think it was something that 4 or 5 years ago would not have seen coming at all. In that kind of sense, as I said, he has achieved a great things in his career. But 4 or 5 years ago, I thought he would have gone on and won even more Premier League titles, maybe even gone on and win, a Champions League. And I still certainly thought that he'd have been the number one at Man City. So to be the third choice at Tottenham, that is a complete dip, and you kind of think he probably would have thought that he would have been capable of more than where he is now. 100% he would have thought that he would have been, if you'd have said to him 5 years ago, you'll be the third choice at Tottenham, he'd have laughed at you. 100% he would have done.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think he was a bit of a all-around disappointment, and that's
in the last few years, certainly. Okay, so I think that was a really interesting take. That's the final whistle. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Midtable Up Podcast. If you enjoy our top 10 lists, please make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Let us know what you would have done differently. If you watch this episode on YouTube, make sure to put your foot through that subscribe button and leave a like on the video, as well as follow us on Spotify and the Podcasts app to keep up to date with the series. Thank you very much. See you next time.